There was a season in your life when you thought the sorrow would destroy you. You cried when nobody could see you. You smiled in front of people while your heart was collapsing in silence. You asked God, "Why me?" You wondered why the door closed, why the person left, why the prayer seemed unanswered, why the dream died, why you had to walk through a valley you never asked for. But listen to me carefully. Plus, the sorrow that came to break you may become the very thing God uses to make you stronger than you have ever been. Your pain is not the end of your story. Your tears are not wasted. Your broken season is not meaningless. If you place your sorrow into the hands of God, He can take what wounded you and turn it into wisdom, compassion, courage, faith, and strength. My dear friend, there are moments in life when sorrow enters without knocking. It does not ask permission. It does not check whether you are ready. It does not care whether you have plans for tomorrow. Sometimes sorrow arrives through a phone call, sometimes through a diagnosis, sometimes through betrayal, sometimes through rejection, sometimes through the death of someone you love. True. Sometimes through a marriage that did not become what you hoped. Sometimes through a child who has walked away. Sometimes through financial hardship, sometimes through loneliness, and sometimes you cannot even explain why you are sorrowful. You simply wake up one morning and discover that something inside you has become heavy. You pray, but the heaviness remains. You worship, but the tears still come. You go to work, you speak to people, you laugh, you answer messages. You continue your responsibilities, but inside there is a battlefield nobody sees. And perhaps somebody listening to me right now knows exactly what I am talking about. You are tired, not merely physically tired. You are tired in your soul. You are tired of being strong for everybody. You are tired of saying, "I am fine," when you are not fine. You are tired of encouraging everyone else while secretly wondering who will encourage you. But today I want you to understand something that sorrow has tried to make you forget. Trust God has not abandoned you because you are hurting. Your tears do not prove that you have no faith. Your sorrow does not mean God has forgotten your name. Your broken heart does not mean your life is broken beyond repair. There is a difference between being wounded and being defeated. You can be wounded and still rise. You can cry and still believe. You can be exhausted and still continue. You can fall and still get back up. You can enter a valley and still come out with greater faith than you had when you entered. The Bible does not present suffering as something imaginary. The scriptures are full of people who cried. David cried. Job cried. Jeremiah cried. Peter wept bitterly. Even Jesus wept. Think about that. The Son of God stood before the grave of Lazarus and wept. So do not believe the lie that spiritual strength means you never cry. Sometimes tears are not evidence of weakness. Sometimes tears are evidence that your heart is still alive. A stone does not cry. A dead heart does not mourn. But you mourn because you loved. You grieve because something mattered. You hurt because you cared, and God sees what others cannot see. Psalm 34 tells us that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, not far from them, near. This means when your heart is broken, God is not standing at a distance saying, "Fix yourself and then come to me." No, He comes near. He enters the place of your pain. He meets you in the valley. He sits with you in the darkness. He strengthens you when your strength is gone. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not that God immediately removes the sorrow. Sometimes the miracle is that He gives you enough grace to survive the night. You went to bed crying. You woke up. You made it another day. You thought you could not continue, but somehow you continued. You thought your heart would stop under the weight of grief, but somehow you kept breathing. You thought you would never smile again, and then one day, unexpectedly, you laughed. That was grace. You thought you would never trust again, and slowly, God taught your heart how to trust Him. That was grace. You thought the wound would define you forever, and then you discovered that the wound could become wisdom. That was grace. Do not underestimate what God can do with a wounded person who surrenders their wounds to Him. The enemy may say, "Look at what happened to you." God says, "Look at what I can make from it." The enemy says, "You are broken." Or God says, "You are being rebuilt." The enemy says, "Your story is over." God says, "Two, I am still writing." The enemy says, "This pain will destroy you." God says, "This pain will teach you how to depend upon me." Do you understand? Your sorrow does not have to become your prison. It can become your classroom. Your pain can teach you things comfort never could. When everything was going well, you thought you could handle life by yourself. Then sorrow came, and suddenly you discovered that your strength was not enough. You discovered that money cannot comfort the soul. People cannot always heal the heart. Success cannot answer every question. Distraction cannot permanently silence pain. And you discovered something deeper, Goinsorrow. You need God. Perhaps that is one of the hidden purposes of sorrow. Not because God enjoys your pain, no, but because sorrow can strip away the illusions we have built around ourselves. When everything is comfortable, we can become self-sufficient. But when the storm comes, we discover where our foundation truly is. Jesus spoke about two men who built houses, one built on sand, the other built on rock. And notice something important. The storm came to both. The rain fell on both. The wind blew against both. The flood came against both. The difference was not the existence of the storm. The difference was the foundation. Listen carefully. You cannot always prevent the storm, but you can choose where you build. You cannot control every betrayal. You cannot control every loss. You cannot control every disappointment. You cannot control every person's decision. You cannot control tomorrow, but you can decide where your soul will stand. If your foundation is people's approval, sorrow will crush you. If your foundation is money, sorrow will shake you. If your foundation is success, sorrow will confuse you. If your foundation is another human being, sorrow may make you feel that your entire world has disappeared. But if your foundation is Christ, the storm may shake you, but it does not have permission to destroy you. You may bend, you may cry, you may fall to your knees, but you will rise again, because your foundation is not your circumstances. Your foundation is God. And perhaps you are asking, but why did God allow this? I do not pretend to have an answer to every painful question. There are mysteries in this life that we will not understand on this side of eternity. But I know this: God can bring purpose out of pain. Romans 8:28 reminds us that God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. It does not say all things are good. It says God works through all things. There is a difference. Betrayal is not good. Death is not good. Abuse is not good. Loss is not good. Sickness is not good. Injustice is not good. But God is so powerful that He can enter even the darkest chapter and bring something good from it. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold. He became a servant. He was falsely accused. He went to prison. And if you had met Joseph in the prison, you might have thought his story was finished. But God was not finished. The pit was not the palace. The prison was not the throne. The betrayal was not the conclusion. God was preparing him, and eventually Joseph stood before the very brothers who had wounded him. He could have allowed bitterness to consume him. He could have said, "Now it is my turn." Now, but Joseph understood something greater. He said that what they intended for evil, God intended for good. Do you see the power of that? The same event that could have produced bitterness produced maturity. The same wound that could have made him cruel made him compassionate. The same betrayal that could have destroyed his future became part of the road toward his purpose. That does not mean you should call evil good. It means you should never underestimate God's ability to redeem what evil tried to destroy. Maybe someone hurt you, and now you are carrying their name in your mind every day. They are sleeping peacefully while you are carrying the burden. They moved on, but you are still replaying the conversation. You are still remembering the betrayal. You are still asking why. You are still imagining what you should have said. Listen to me. At some point, you must surrender the courtroom of your heart to God. You cannot spend the rest of your life prosecuting someone who already hurt you. You cannot keep drinking poison and hope the other person becomes sick. Bitterness will not punish them. It will punish you. Forgiveness does not mean what happened was acceptable. Forgiveness does not mean trust must immediately be restored. Forgiveness does not mean you must return to an unsafe situation. Forgiveness means you release your right to personally carry the burden of vengeance and place judgment into God's hands. You say, "Lord, you know what happened. You know what they did. You know what they said. You know the tears nobody saw. I refuse to let this person occupy the throne of my heart. I give this wound to you." And when you surrender the wound, something begins to change. You may still remember, but the memory no longer controls you. You may still know what happened, but it no longer defines who you are. You may still have scars, but the scars become evidence that you survived. And there is something beautiful about scars. A scar says, "I was wounded, but I healed." A scar says, "The attack did not get the final word." A scar says, "I passed through something that could have killed me, but I am still here." Do not be ashamed of every scar. Some scars become testimonies. The place where you once cried may become the place where you help somebody else survive. The season when you felt abandoned may become the season that teaches you how to recognize the lonely. The financial struggle may teach you generosity. The rejection may teach you identity. The failure may teach you humility. The disappointment may teach you patience. The loneliness may teach you intimacy with God. The sorrow may become your strength. But there is a condition. You must not worship your wound. Some people build an identity around what happened to them. Their entire personality becomes, "I was betrayed, I was rejected, I was abandoned, I was mistreated, I failed, I lost." And yes, those things may be part of your story, but they are not the entirety of your identity. You are not merely what happened to you. You are more than your worst day. You are more than your greatest failure. You are more than somebody else's rejection. You are more than the relationship that ended. You are more than the opportunity you lost. You are more than the mistake you made. Your story is still being written. Do not take a period and place it where God has placed a comma. You may think it is the end. God may be saying, "Wait, You may see ashes. God may see something that can rise again. You may see emptiness. God may see space for something new. You may see a closed door. God may be protecting you from something you cannot see. There are doors you cried over because they closed. Years later, you thanked God they did. Oh, there are people you beg God to keep in your life. Years later, you realize their departure was protection. There are opportunities you thought you needed. Later, you discovered they would have taken you away from your purpose. Sometimes God's no hurts before it makes sense. Sometimes His silence is painful before it becomes meaningful. Sometimes you have to walk by faith before you understand the road. And that is why faith is called faith. If you understood everything, you would not need trust. There are moments when all you can pray is, Lord, I do not understand, but I trust you. That is a powerful prayer, not because you have all the answers, but because you are choosing God's character over your confusion. You are saying, I don't understand the chapter, but I trust the author. Perhaps today you are standing in a chapter that makes no sense. Do not throw away the entire book because you hate one chapter. Joseph had a pit chapter. David had a wilderness chapter. Moses had a desert chapter. Peter had a failure chapter. Paul had a suffering chapter. Lazarus had a tomb chapter. But God was not finished. And if God is not finished, neither are you. Maybe your sorrow has been asking you a question. Will you become bitter or will you become better? Because pain can take you in two directions. The same fire that hardens one thing can purify another. The same pressure that crushes some things creates diamonds in others. The question is not merely, why am I suffering? The deeper question is, Lord, what are you forming in me through this? What is God teaching you? Patience, humility, compassion, courage, discernment, dependence, faith. Maybe your sorrow is teaching you to stop placing your identity in people. Maybe it is teaching you that not everybody deserves access to your heart. Maybe it is teaching you to establish boundaries. Maybe it is teaching you to stop chasing people who have already chosen to leave. Maybe it is teaching you to pray before reacting. Maybe it is teaching you that silence can be wiser than an argument. Maybe it is teaching you that your worth does not rise and fall according to somebody else's opinion. And perhaps most importantly, it is teaching you to seek God not only when you need something from Him, but because He is God. There is a difference between loving God because He gives and loving God because He is. Anyone can praise when the harvest is abundant, but what happens when the field looks empty? Can you still say, God is good? Anyone can worship when the prayer is answered, but can you still worship while waiting? Anyone can shout when the door opens, but can you trust God when the door closes? This is where faith becomes real, not in the absence of sorrow. In the presence of sorrow, faith is not pretending that the storm does not exist. Faith is looking at the storm and saying, my God is greater. Faith is looking at the grave and saying, God still has the final word. A faith is looking at your broken heart and saying, I will not let despair become my master. A faith is saying, I may not understand today, but I refuse to believe that God has abandoned me. And sometimes strength does not look like shouting. Sometimes strength looks like getting out of bed. Sometimes strength looks like praying one sentence. Sometimes strength looks like refusing to return to the person who destroyed your peace. Sometimes strength looks like asking for help. Sometimes strength looks like admitting, I am hurting. Do not be ashamed to ask for help. God often works through people. If your sorrow has become overwhelming, seek wise and trustworthy support. Speak to a pastor, counselor, mature believer, or someone safe who can walk with you. Faith and wise help are not enemies. You do not have to carry everything alone. The Christian life was never designed to be lived in isolation. There is strength in community. There is healing in honest conversation. There is wisdom in admitting that you need someone beside you. And there is no shame in saying, please pray for me. My friend, you may have spent years asking God to remove the pain. Maybe today you need to ask Him for something else. Lord, use it. Lord, teach me through it. Lord, do not let this suffering be wasted. Lord, make me stronger without making me harder. That is important because there is a danger in becoming strong. You can become so afraid of being hurt again that you become emotionally unavailable. You can become so determined never to be betrayed again that you trust nobody. You can become so independent that you reject genuine love. You can become so guarded that you cannot receive blessing. God does not want to make you hard. He wants to make you strong. There is a difference between a hard heart and a strong heart. A hard heart says, I will never love again. A strong heart says, I will love wisely. A hard heart says, I need nobody. A strong heart says, I know whom I can trust. A hard heart says, I will get revenge. A strong heart says, I will leave justice in God's hands. A hard heart says, my pain defines me. A strong heart says, my pain taught me, but God defines me. Do not let sorrow steal your tenderness. Jesus was strong enough to confront evil and tender enough to weep. He was strong enough to endure the cross and compassionate enough to forgive. True strength does not eliminate compassion. True strength deepens it. That is why some of the most compassionate people you will ever meet are people who have suffered. They recognize tears because they have cried. They recognize loneliness because they have sat alone. They recognize rejection because they have felt unwanted. They recognize fear because they have trembled. They recognize grief because they have buried someone they loved. Your suffering may give you a language that another wounded person understands. One day somebody may come to you with tears in their eyes, and you may be able to say, I understand, not because you read about pain, because you walked through it. And your testimony may become the bridge that leads someone back to hope. Do not despise the valley. The valley can teach you what the mountain never could. On the mountain, you celebrate. In the valley, you learn to depend. On the mountain, everybody sees you. In the valley, God sees you. On the mountain, you talk about God's power. In the valley, you experience it. Psalm 23 does not say we will never walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It says, though I walk through, not into forever, through. That word matters. You are walking through. The valley is not your permanent address. You are passing through it. The night is not forever. Winter is not forever. The storm is not forever. The wound is not forever. There is a morning coming. The psalmist says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Notice the scripture does not deny weeping. It acknowledges it. There is weeping. There is a night, but there is also morning. Perhaps you are currently living in the night. Then hold on. Morning is God's territory too. You may not see it yet, but that does not mean it is not coming. Seeds disappear into the darkness before they appear as plants. A seed must be buried before it grows. And perhaps some seasons of your life feel like burial. But burial is not always destruction. Sometimes something must be buried so something new can grow. The old version of you may need to die, the version that lived for approval, the version that chased everyone, the version that feared every rejection, the version that believed money was security, the version that thought control was peace, the version that depended entirely on human beings. Perhaps God is allowing you to discover something deeper. I am your refuge. I am your strength. I am your shepherd. I am your provider. I am your comfort. I am your hope. And when you discover God as your foundation, sorrow no longer has the same authority over you. It can hurt you, but it cannot own you. You can cry without collapsing. You can grieve without losing faith. You can remember without returning. You can love without losing yourself. You can move forward without pretending the past never happened. And this is where sorrow becomes strength. Not because sorrow itself is powerful, but because God is powerful enough to redeem it. Your pain is not your savior. Christ is. Your suffering is not your identity. Christ is. Your past is not your future. God is still writing. And I want you to stop speaking about yourself as though you are permanently broken. Stop saying, I am nothing. Stop saying, my life is over. Stop saying, nobody will ever love me. Stop saying, true, I will never recover. You do not know what God is going to do tomorrow. You have seen today. You have not seen tomorrow. You have experienced this chapter. You have not read the final page. So do not make permanent declarations based on temporary pain. Your feelings are real, but feelings are not always prophets. You may feel abandoned. That does not mean you are abandoned. You may feel forgotten. That does not mean you are forgotten. You may feel hopeless. That does not mean hope has disappeared. Sometimes faith means believing God's word above your feelings. Your emotions deserve compassion, but they do not deserve the throne. Let God sit on the throne, and when sorrow comes again, and yes, there may be difficult days again, you will know what to do. You will pray. You will breathe. You will seek God. You will seek wise people. You will rest. You will grieve honestly. You will not pretend. But you will also remember, I have survived storms before. I have seen God's faithfulness before. I have walked through valleys before. And if He carried me then, He can carry me now. You have more strength than you realize, not because you are naturally powerful, but because God has sustained you through things you thought would destroy you. Look backward for a moment. Remember the thing you thought you could never survive. You survived. Remember the night you thought would never end. It ended. Remember the person you thought you could never live without. You are still here. Remember the failure you thought would define you. It did not. Remember the door you thought you needed. God found another way. You are evidence that sorrow did not have the final word. And if God brought you through yesterday, do not assume He has forgotten you today. Perhaps you are stronger now because of what you survived. You have discernment you did not have before. You have wisdom you did not have before. You have compassion you did not have before. You pray differently now. You see people differently now. You understand grace differently now. You know that life is fragile. You know that tomorrow is not guaranteed. You know that popularity is temporary. You know that possessions cannot heal the soul. You know that God's presence is more valuable than human applause. And that knowledge was expensive. It came through pain. But do not waste what pain taught you. If you learned compassion, practice compassion. If you learned forgiveness, forgive. If you learned patience, be patient. If you learn dependence on God, remain dependent. If you learn that life is short, stop wasting your days on meaningless hatred. If you learn that people can leave, appreciate the people who remain. If you learn that tomorrow is uncertain, live faithfully today. Let sorrow produce fruit. That is how pain becomes strength. You do not merely survive it. You allow God to transform you through it. And one day, you may look back at the very season you once questioned and say, now I understand why I had to learn what I learned. Not every question will be answered, but your character can still be transformed. Not every wound will disappear from memory, but the wound can stop controlling your future. Not every relationship will be restored, but your heart can still be healed. Not every prayer will be answered the way you expected, but you can still discover that God's presence was enough. My friend, don't run from your sorrow. Bring it to God. Cry if you need to cry. Pray while you cry. Worship while you cry. And if all you can say is, Jesus, help me, then say it. That prayer is enough for today. You do not need perfect words. You need an honest heart. Tell God, Father, I am tired. Father, I am angry. Father, I am confused. Father, I miss them. Father, I don't understand. Father, I am afraid. Father, I need you. God is not intimidated by your honesty. He already knows. Prayer is not informing God. Prayer is bringing your heart into His presence. And there, slowly, He begins to transform you. Perhaps not instantly, perhaps not dramatically, but faithfully, one day at a time, one prayer at a time, one tear at a time, one step at a time. Healing often happens more quietly than we expect. You may not wake up tomorrow completely free of sorrow, but perhaps tomorrow you will carry it differently. Then the next day, a little differently, and eventually you realize, I am not where I used to be. That is progress. Do not despise small progress. If today you got out of bed, thank God. If today you prayed, thank God. If today you refused to return to what wounded you, thank God. If today you forgave one small part of your past, thank God. If today you smiled for 5 minutes, thank God. Grace does not always arrive as a thunderstorm. Sometimes grace is simply enough strength for the next step. And you do not need strength for the next 10 years. You need strength for today. Jesus taught us to pray for daily bread. Daily, not tomorrow's bread, today's. Why? Because God gives grace for today's journey. You are trying to carry tomorrow's sorrow with today's strength. Put it down. Tomorrow has not arrived. Stay with God today. There is enough grace for today. And tomorrow, there will be grace for tomorrow. So stop rehearsing tragedies that have not happened. Stop living in imaginary futures. Stop punishing yourself with possibilities. Give God today, walk today, pray today, love today, forgive today, serve today. And let tomorrow remain in God's hands. There is another thing I want you to understand. Your sorrow can become a source of authority, not worldly authority, but spiritual authority. When you have suffered and remained faithful, your testimony carries weight. When you have lost and still worshipped, your worship becomes deeper. When you have been betrayed and still refused hatred, your character becomes stronger. When you have cried and still prayed, your faith becomes more than words. People can argue with theology. They can debate opinions, but they cannot easily argue with a transformed life. You can say, I was broken, but God restored me. I was lost, but God found me. I was bitter, but God taught me forgiveness. I was afraid, but God taught me courage. I thought my story was finished, but God showed me another chapter. That testimony may become someone else's lifeline. So don't hide everything God has brought you through. There is a time to keep private things private, but there is also a time to testify, not to glorify the pain, to glorify the God who carried you through it. Your scars can point toward Him. Your testimony can become worship. Your survival can become ministry. Your sorrow can become strength. And perhaps the greatest transformation happens when you stop asking only, why did this happen to me? And begin asking, who can I help because I went through this? Who can you encourage? Who can you comfort? Who can you pray for? Who can you listen to? Who can you remind that they are not alone? You know what loneliness feels like. Use that knowledge to become present for somebody else. You know what rejection feels like. Use that knowledge to welcome somebody. You know what grief feels like. Use that knowledge to sit quietly beside someone who is grieving. You know what failure feels like. Use that knowledge to show mercy. You know what it means to be forgiven. Use that knowledge to forgive. This is redemption. The enemy says, your pain was wasted. God says, let me use it. The enemy says, you suffered for nothing. A God says, I can make your suffering a testimony. The enemy says, you are disqualified. God says, I can still use you. Never underestimate a surrendered life. Moses had a past. David had failures. Peter denied Jesus. Paul persecuted believers, yet God used them. God does not require a perfect history. He requires a surrendered heart. So surrender your sorrow, surrender your anger, surrender your disappointment, surrender your questions, surrender your need to understand everything, and say, Lord, take what I cannot change and teach me how to trust you with it. That prayer can change your life. You cannot change yesterday, but you can decide what yesterday will produce in you. Yesterday can produce bitterness. Or wisdom yesterday can produce fear, or discernment yesterday can produce hatred or compassion. Yesterday can produce despair or deeper faith. The event happened, but what you allow God to make from it is still unfolding. Do not give your past the authority to dictate your future. You can honor what happened without living there. You can remember without remaining. You can grieve without surrendering hope. You can acknowledge the wound without worshiping it. And eventually you will realize something. The person you became through Christ is stronger than the person who existed before the storm. You thought the storm came to destroy you, but perhaps God used it to reveal you. You discovered courage you didn't know you possessed. You discovered faith you didn't know you had. You discovered endurance. You discovered prayer. You discovered mercy. You discovered that God was closer than you thought. And perhaps that is your greatest strength. Not that you never suffered, but that suffering did not separate you from God. You still believe. You still pray. You still hope. You still get up. You still love. You still worship. That is strength. And one day, when somebody asks you, how did you survive? You will not say, because I was strong. You will say, because God was faithful. That is the testimony. Not, look how powerful I am, but look how faithful God has been. And if you are in sorrow right now, I want you to hear this final truth. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. Your tears are not meaningless. Your prayers are not automatically wasted because the answer has not arrived. Your waiting season is not proof of God's absence. God sees you. God knows you. God understands what you cannot explain. And even when you cannot feel Him, He remains God. The sun is still shining even when clouds cover it. And God's faithfulness remains even when your emotions cannot perceive it. So hold on. Do not quit in the middle of the chapter. Do not make a permanent decision because of a temporary storm. Do not throw away your future because your present hurts. Do not let one person's rejection convince you that you are unworthy of love. Do not let one failure convince you that you are incapable. Do not let one loss convince you that life has nothing left to offer. Do not let sorrow become your identity. Let Christ become your identity. And when sorrow comes, say, Lord, I give you this pain. Lord, make me wiser. Lord, make me kinder. Lord, make me stronger. Lord, make me more faithful. Lord, use my story, and then walk one step, then another. You do not have to see the whole staircase. Just take the next faithful step. The valley will not last forever. The tears will not last forever. The night will not last forever. There will be mourning. There will be restoration. There will be moments of laughter again. There will be days when your heart feels light again. And even before the circumstances change, God can change the person standing in the circumstances. That is strength. Strength is not the absence of sorrow. Strength is knowing where to take your sorrow. Strength is not never falling. Strength is getting back up. Strength is not never crying. Strength is crying and still believing. Strength is not having every answer. Strength is trusting God without every answer. Strength is not becoming hard. Strength is remaining tender while becoming wise. Strength is not revenge. Strength is forgiveness. Strength is not forgetting the past. Strength is refusing to let the past control the future. Strength is not pretending that everything is okay. Strength is bringing everything honestly before God. And perhaps your greatest strength will come from the very place currently consider your greatest weakness. Perhaps the tears you are ashamed of will become the tears that teach you compassion. Perhaps the failure you regret will become the wisdom that saves someone else. Perhaps the loneliness you hate will become the season in which you discover God's presence. Perhaps the closed door will redirect your entire life. Perhaps the heartbreak will teach you what real love is. Perhaps the valley will teach you how to recognize the shepherd. Perhaps the sorrow will become the soil from which your greatest spiritual strength grows. So lift your head, not because everything is fixed. Lift your head because God is still God. Stand again, not because you are never weak. Stand because grace is available. Pray again, not because you understand everything. Pray because you trust the one who understands. Love again, not carelessly but wisely. Hope again, not because life has promised you an easy road, but because Christ has promised that you are not walking it alone. And when you look back someday, you may realize the season I thought would destroy me became the season that deepened me. The sorrow I thought would end me became the sorrow God transformed. The tears I thought were signs of weakness became part of my testimony. The valley I feared became the place where I didn't discuss. I discovered the shepherd, and then you will understand where, then will understand me. God did not waste your sorrow. He used it. He shaped you through it. He strengthened you through it. He taught you through it. And what the enemy intended to bury you under, God can use as the ground from which you rise. So rise with humility, rise with faith, rise with wisdom, rise with compassion, rise with forgiveness, rise with courage, rise with Christ. Your sorrow is not your final chapter. Your pain is not your permanent name. Your past is not your prophecy. Your tears are not the end. There is still purpose ahead. There is still grace ahead. There is still work ahead. There are still people you will encourage. There are still prayers you will pray. There are still moments you will experience. There are still songs you will sing. There is still a testimony being written. And perhaps one day the very person who thought they were finished will become the person who tells somebody else, I thought I was finished too, but God carried me. I thought I could not survive, but God gave me strength. I thought the darkness would last forever, but morning came. I thought my sorrow would destroy me, but God transformed it into strength. So today, give God your sorrow, not tomorrow. Today, give Him the tears. Give Him the questions. Give Him the disappointment. Give Him the memories. Give Him the heartbreak. Give Him the fear. Give Him everything you have been carrying alone, and say, Father, I cannot carry this by myself anymore. I place it into your hands. Do not allow my sorrow to make me bitter. Make me better. Do not allow my wounds to make me cruel. Make me compassionate. Do not allow my failures to make me hopeless. Make me humble. Do not allow my losses to make me faithless. Make me trust you more. Take what I cannot change and transform what you can. Take my sorrow and turn it into strength. Take my tears and turn them into testimony. Take my brokenness and make it an instrument of your grace. And above everything else, never let me forget that you are with me. Duane, my friend, if that is the only prayer you can pray today, pray it. Because you do not need to have everything together before coming to God. Come broken, come tired, come confused, come grieving, come afraid, come exactly as you are, and let God meet you there. The hands that created you are not confused by your brokenness. The God who sustained you yesterday has not lost His ability to sustain you today. The one who brought you through the last storm has not become weaker. And the one who holds tomorrow already knows the road you are about to walk. Therefore, do not surrender to sorrow. Surrender your sorrow to God. There is a difference. One destroys your hope, the other transforms your pain. And perhaps the greatest strength you will ever possess will not be the strength to avoid suffering. It will be the strength to walk through suffering without losing your faith, your compassion, your integrity, and your hope. So walk through the valley, walk through the tears, walk through the unanswered questions, walk through the waiting, walk through the uncertainty, and keep your eyes on Christ, because the valley has an exit. The night has a morning. The wound can heal. The broken heart can love again. The fallen can rise. The lost can be found. The weary can be renewed. And sorrow, when surrendered into the hands of God, can become strength. Not the strength that says, I never needed anyone, but the strength that says, I know where my help comes from. Not the strength that says, I can do everything myself, but the strength that says, true, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Not the strength that says, nothing can hurt me, but the strength that says, oh, even when I am hurt, God will not abandon me. Not the strength that says, I will never cry again, but the strength that says, I can cry and still trust. And that is the strength I pray you receive. May God take every sorrow you have carried and turn it into wisdom. May He take every tear and turn it into compassion. May He take every disappointment and turn it into discernment. May He take every failure and turn it into humility. May He take every loss and teach you to treasure what truly matters. May He take every wound and prevent it from becoming a weapon against yourself or others. May He take your broken places and fill them with His grace. And when you finally stand again, may you not stand as the person who never suffered. May you stand as the person who suffered, cried, waited, struggled, prayed, and still discovered that God was faithful, because that testimony is powerful. You are still here, and as long as you are still here, the story is not finished. There is still purpose, there is still grace, there is still hope, there is still a future. So breathe, pray, trust, take the next step, and let God turn your sorrow into your greatest strength. Amen.